This is what comes to many people's minds when they think of Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. Organized crime figures being gunned down in the streets. That's what happened to Carmine Variali and Frank Santoro last Thursday on Bath Avenue in Bensonhurst. Saturday night, another hit about 20 blocks away. Some other recent mob executions in Bensonhurst were Frank DeChico, blown up in his car last year. 2 more men shot a few months after that. Sal Scarfer's life ended execution style this January. So if you watch the news, you might get the idea that Bensonhurst is a place where mobsters come to get killed.
The streets will never love you back. Time, if you lived to be 19, 21 years old, you're lucky. My neighborhood is very dangerous. Okay. All right. I'm here with Don Berlin. Don Berlin, if you want, you give a couple shout outs to the people in the chat. Do you see them?
Yeah. Yep. How are you? How is everybody? Thank you for your patience and understanding. I apologize for being late. It's on me because we have our special. Hold on one second. I got reverb. I got to deal with the. Hold on. Let me get out of. Okay. Can you hear me now?
You're good, Don. Hey, guys.
Turn off YouTube here. Hold on. Stand by. Okay. How about now? Is everything okay?
You might have a little echo. I think you're good.
Do I still have echo?
I think you're good.
Okay.
How's he sound, guys? How's he sound? Give me a thumbs up. Okay, let me give you a shout out. Go ahead.
If there's a huge echo and whatever, like say there's a huge echo and what have you, and I'll come out and come back in because I'm not where I'm normally, and I'm not on my normal computer.
I think you're good. Let me just give a shout out to Boston J.
Okay.
From Brooklyn, Christopher Capello, War, Marco, and everyone who showed up today. Thanks for showing up. We're going to have a good show today. I got Don Berlin. He's my co-host. We got a special guest today. He'll announce him. But we're going to talk about a couple things. You know, me and Don, what we do is we come on every Sunday and we bounce off each other, talk about some subjects of what's going on, current events and things like that. So I'm going to give it to Don Berlin.
So thank you very much, Jimmy. Again, I apologize for the delay for everybody. You know, we're normally on at 5 o'clock, but I'm not at home and I'm not around where I normally am. And but where I am is with a good friend of mine that I want to introduce. His name is Robert Baer, B-A-E-R. And Robert is sitting behind me. Bob was formerly a CIA officer that served for many years. We've been partners in crime for a long, long time, friends and colleagues and what have you. And he's going to tell some stories about some different things in his life and in his most recent book. Bob Baer wrote the book, which became the movie Syriana. A lot of people remember the movie that won the Academy Award, Syriana, with George Clooney. He wrote a number of other books, including his most recent one called The Fourth Estate, which I'm intimately familiar with. One of the characters is my former partner, and he'll talk a little bit about that too. So, and then the other thing is, something that is always of intrigue on this channel is, the CIA and the mob, and how the two forces kind of work together well. And Bob is here to talk with you about, that issue and what he knows about them. So, welcome to the show, Bob. Introduce yourself and tell everybody a little bit about your background and where we are today.
Yeah, a couple decades ago, I had a choice between becoming a downhill racer or joining the CIA. So I joined the CIA, but I never slowed down. In the mid '90s, I was in charge of Iraq. I was in Iraq at the time. Saddam Hussein was in power, and it came together. I had a chance to capture him or kill him. And I started sending cables back to headquarters saying, hey, here's the guys that are going to replace Saddam. We're going to avoid a war. And we've got 12 tanks. We're going to surround him at his house in Aujah and give him a choice to either surrender to us or we're going to blow him off his hill. Anyhow, it ended up in just a gigantic fiasco like you wouldn't believe. At one point, Clinton's national security advisor called up the CIA director at 4 a.m. and was yelling at him, have you lost your mind? This is an illegal assassination attempt, and on and on and on. And anyhow, what happened is 3 armies around me went on. The Turkish army, the Iranian army, and the Iraqi army went on full alert. And my group started to fight the Iraqi army, and we ended up overrunning 3 divisions and 5 corps. Just wiped them off the map. They didn't exist again. And anyhow, I came back and I was met by the FBI, who was charging me with crossing interstate borders to commit murder. I think, is that Title 18? You don't use it's Title 18 charge. So it was organized crime charge. It was conspiracy. We were polygraphed and got it. And so at that point, I said, all right, when your employer's trying to put you in jail for doing the right thing, it's time to leave. So I resigned from the CIA. And then I've just been out doing movies and writing books. I did a series for the History Channel called Hunting Hitler. And what we did was took just the intelligence and is there any suggestion that he got away to South America? And, it was a great show. We found all these Nazi compounds that were completely stocked with weapons and electricity. And we kept on saying, well, if they weren't for Hitler, who were they for? And there was no answer to them. Found all sorts of Nazi artifacts, dug them up. It was sort of a crazy show. So I've been into entertainment since. I do a bunch of, consulting movies. Then I did Syriana, which Clooney played me in the movie. That was pretty wild. But the great thing is, you're in the CIA. No one knows who you are. You're undercover. You are whoever you think. I used to get on planes, and in order not to talk to people, I would tell whoever's sitting next to me. They'd ask, "Well, hey, what are you doing?" Or I said, "I do actuarial tables for cancer victims." And that just ends the conversation. And then you go to sleep on the plane and no one ever talks to you again. So your whole life is about no one ever talking to you. That's your goal. And then all of a sudden you're out. And it was funny when the people that think I'm still in the CIA, it's very odd. And they come to me with the wildest proposals. Among them, Don and I were talking about Armenian Power. The Armenian gang in Glendale came to me. Vito Rizzuto. Remember Vito Rizzuto?
Sure.
He was the guy that jumped out of the closet in the movie Donnie Brasco and shoots the three capos.
Yeah.
The Rizzutos came to me. So I said, well, I couldn't imagine what they wanted. So I flew up to Montreal, where they were known as the fifth family, and sat down with the Rizzutos in this fish restaurant. It was very odd. And then spent like 4 or 5 days with them, going to their parties and things like that. They assumed that I still had CIA connections. And what they wanted to do is get Dad out of jail, who's in jail in New York, in return for getting information on the Russian mob and various Middle Eastern people. It was funny when I left Montreal, you get stopped by customs there. And the guys from customs said, hey, what were you doing up here in Canada? I said, I was seeing the Rizzutos. Trust me, I got a secondary. And then we had a good time. So people come out of the woodworks. They still are to this day.
So Jimmy, let me ask you a question. Like in your experience, do you remember the Rizzuto family and what they represented in the New York Five families?
Well, the Rizzutos, they're from Montreal.
Montreal, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they were underneath the Banana umbrella.
Yep.
Yeah. But you know what, Bob? Not to change the subject, but now the CIA and the mob, I mean, they're familiar in the sense of, you hear a lot of bad things about CIA. They kill a lot of people. You know what I'm saying? We don't know much about you people. Everything's a secret, and you're very on the down low. I'm saying, but I wanted to know, how does the CIA recruit people? We watch these movies and we get the idea that the CIA recruits people through colleges. When the kids go to colleges, they get approached and they ask them, do you want to be involved in the CIA? We know how the mob recruits people from the neighborhood. The kid, since he's a kid, you take him underneath his wing, and eventually, you keep on doing the right thing, and one day you'll be one of us. But how does it work with the CIA?
And in that regard, and I'm going to pass that question back to Bob, but there are similarities between the two institutions: the institution of organized crime in the Five Families, and the institution of the CIA. And as a matter of fact, some people refer to the CIA as, quote, the outfit, which is the Chicago version of organized crime. So go ahead.
Well, I mean, it used to be they did it out of colleges. You'd have a professor that worked for the CIA, at least helped the CIA, and he would identify students that were capable of doing the job. And it used to be really, at one point, all Ivy League, Harvard and the rest of it, and then people would come in. The problem was that a lot of them were trust funders. The smart brother would go work for an investment bank, and the other brother would go work for the CIA. So I'm not sure they were particularly competent. And then really in the 70s to 80s, they got away from Ivy League stuff, and they did simply, college recruiting. They set up a stand on Jobs Day or whatever it's called, and they'd have a little CIA thing there, and you would walk up. That's how my wife joined the CIA. She could join the FBI or the CIA, and she joined the CIA. And now a lot of people that apply, they do it on the internet. They always tell you, listen, put your application on the internet, answer a CIA questionnaire. And it's from there they go through the data, your social media. And if you're on social media and I don't know what you're doing, but you immediately get eliminated. And people just sit around, as I understand, and wait for the call. They're looking for smart people. And, by the way, the people I've seen go into the CIA recently, I wouldn't even have made it in because their qualifications are so high these days. This is what I'm told. Languages, smart. How long they stay, I don't know, but they're smart and they're good. And the standards have gone up very much since 9/11.
I'm sure one of the standards is you definitely need to know another language for sure.
They train you in language. They trained me in Arabic. They gave me 2 years of Arabic, and then I stood on a consular line for 2 years, so 4 years of Arabic. That's all I did was speak Arabic, and then I handled. So the problem is when someone comes in, like an Arabic or Chinese speaker, frankly, there's a thing called the long tail. That means they got family members in China or Saudi Arabia or wherever. And they can't trust them because they put pressure on the members. So they prefer to train people in language. So if you join the CIA, you say, I want to go to Chinese, you're going to spend 2 years. And ideally, you spend a career working against the Chinese.
And then the other question that a lot of people ask is, the history of why the CIA and the mob joined forces back in the 60s, and whether or not it really did lead up to the assassination of John F. Kennedy, all of these other, conspiratorial theories and so on and so forth. So what are your thoughts about, well, first off, institutionally, what are some of the similarities, if you will, between, the two as organizations, if you will?
Well, I mean, in the 60s, Bob Mayhew, a former FBI agent, was on contract at the CIA. And he was hired to assassinate Castro.
Right.
And he went to his mob buddies because he had been working in gambling in Las Vegas and knew a lot of people. He was a straight up guy and did this as a favor to the CIA and to the Kennedy family. And he did go to the mob and said, "Hey, let's kill Kennedy."
You mean Castro?
I mean Castro. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
I'm trying to wake up here. It's still early in Colorado.
Yeah.
So everybody that was part of this operation was murdered very violently. One was put in a barrel, dropped out, off the shore of Miami, things like that. But the CIA does not hire international assassins. That's Hollywood. You've got to outsource this stuff. And in war zones, it's not the CIA officers who are out killing people. They go to Joint Special Operations Command. They go, to foreign served Australians in particular, and they go get people. Like, who did the Bin Laden raid? It was Red Squadron. Red Squadron was known for leaving no prisoners, and that's why they were sent in to get Bin Laden. Because the orders to Red Squadron were, before they flew in, was kill anything that moves or glitters. And they took their orders literally. Yeah. So there was no way to survive that. And I know the Obama administration says, no, we never intended to whack them, blah, blah. But that's just BS. I mean, you talk to these guys and, it's the quarter second rule. You either have a quarter second to give up and show total submission, or they kill you. But so this is really the military, or if you're doing something really off the books, you go to the mob.
And that's kind of like what the theory was back then. Flip back to, there was a question by Mr. Sanchez that flipped by quickly, Jimmy. And I think the gist of it was, when the president of the United States is in town somewhere, okay, is the CIA with him as well as the Secret Service, or is it just the Secret Service alone? That was the gist of his question.
The Secret Service did what again?
The question was, when the president is moving around.
Oh, the CIA never goes with him. The CIA, you look, in the United States, the Office of Security carries guns, and that's it. But for the CIA, at the moment guns come out, you've lost the operation. Anytime there's, I had an asset in Paris that was whacked by the Israelis, by Mossad, right in the middle of in a hotel lobby. And the CIA says, we're out of here. We got rid of everybody associated with that. We just.
But the CIA, aren't they the ones that also bring down all these other countries?
Yeah, but you always get proxies to do it. You go back to the Diem regime in Vietnam, and it was ultimately the ambassador in the military and the CIA said, hey, we can't live with Diem, get rid of him. And what happens is there's a back channel, like in Chile. You know, we tell the Chilean military, hey, we can't really live with this guy. But you look at Chile, and it was really Kissinger who was behind it. So it's the whole U.S. government that gets involved. And you look at Iran, and it was basically getting the Shah, giving him a backbone. But ultimately, it wasn't Mossadegh. It wasn't the CIA who organized the coup against Mossadegh. So there's a lot of subtleties in this, and the CIA is occasionally used for back channels. If you want a secret delivered to a foreign government or a military, the CIA officer walks in. These are the orders from the president. This isn't the CIA. This is U.S. policy. And I have never, ever heard of the CIA doing a rogue coup. But you got to keep in mind with the CIA, these people get paid every 2 weeks. They obey the law, and there's the occasional ones. Always that you'll have them who don't obey the law, and they're quickly fired. I mean, in the CIA, you're polygraphed like every year. And if you're in a sensitive operation, you can't get away with anything. And they keep track of your money. There's been mistakes, mind you, but they're rare.
So, Jimmy, yeah, go ahead.
What was the movie with Robert Redford and Brad Pitt? The CIA agents at the end. Brad Pitt is caught up in a prison, and Robert Redford reaches out to the China government to get Brad Pitt out. I think that
was that Spy Games.
Spy Game. Is that it?
Yeah. Well, that movie pissed me off because I used to drive a taxi in Beirut, and they stole that for the Brad Pitt rule. Where he's driving a taxi.
Yeah.
Anyhow, that's not much of a walk-on part, but they stole it all day.
Another great film.
That was a great film.
The CIA.
3 Days of the Condor was a great film.
Yeah,
I love that film. But the film I always watch for the CIA stuff is The In-Laws, the original one with Peter Falk. We used to memorize the lines from that movie when we were in the CIA and use them on each other. Remember that movie, The In-Laws?
Yeah.
Serpentine Shelley?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that was interesting. So, another question a lot of people talk about is whether or not they can go in and just volunteer. Okay, young people today are looking for ways in which they can contribute to their country. I try to explain to everybody the pedestals of the stool. So for those who are watching, here are the pedestals of the stool, and then Bob can kind of tell you more specifics about it. It's kind of like, if you will, in a way, it's kind of like, the 5 families, if you will. You have the boss, the underboss, the common regime, the members, the associates, and so on and so forth. Well, in the U.S. government, one kind of like parallel you could make is that not that they're the same by any stretch. I'm not saying that. I just organizationally. So you have the COCOMs, and that's the traditional Army, Navy, Marines, so on and so forth, Air Force, Coast Guard, and what have you. And those are the traditional, service branches that people join every day and then become veterans after they do their period of service. Then you have also the intelligence community. So that would be the intelligence agencies of the United States, CIA, NSA, NRO, and so on and so forth. There are 13 of them that basically, or more, that basically form the intelligence community. So you could join that side too. And then also there is something known as the DoD civilian force. These are the people that are the GS 15, 14, 13, so on and so forth, the civilian workforce of the Department of Defense that support both the COCOMs and the intelligence community. And then finally, you have the contractor community, where some of the greater opportunities exist. And then within the contractor community, these are not DoD employees. They don't work for the military. They don't work for the IC, but they are under contract. And underneath those contracts are various different types of roles. You could be a direct military contractor. I won't get into the differences, but there are many different roles and what have you. So to young people today, there's a lot of opportunity to serve the country and what have you. You know, one of the things Jimmy talks about now in his life is that it's really a life of service for him, trying to get people out off the streets, trying to tell young people that, you know, crime is not the way to go. And what Bob and I talk about a lot is that there is room for service for the inside the military, inside the DOD, and the IC. It's just that that they are much more selective than what have you. But Jimmy, why don't you talk about like what your mission is and with kids today and so on.
I'll tell you, my mission where I am at today in my lifetime is helping anyone that needs help in any way. I mean, I'm available. You can contact me through the real Jimmy Calandra at gmail.com. Any way I can help you. If you have a young kid that needs direction, if I could talk to him any way, maybe persuade him to go in a different direction, help him. I also have friends that are, in drug counselors and stuff like that. So if anybody needs any help, I could direct you to a friend of mine. And, if you're eligible, we could maybe even help you beat your drug addiction. Yeah. So anything I could do anyway, I just want to help people. It's not necessarily just young kids, it's anybody out there. I mean, anyone that's fighting any kind of battle, whether you need an ad for someone to listen or, to someone to help you with any kind of, friendly help, that's what I'm here for.
So why, in your opinion, why do you feel impassioned about the need to get kids that are falling into the streets off the streets today? What is your reason for that?
I'll tell you, Don, you know what? It's a good question. And the thing is because, look, I was one of those kids. I mean, yeah. I grew up without a father. My father was in Manhattan. Unfortunately, my father had a drinking problem, but he wasn't a bad guy. He just wasn't there, and when you have children, it's not what you give them, it's the time you spend with them, so you have to give them your time because they need direction. And I was that kid that needed direction, so I feel that. I'm saying, and I remember when I was a kid and my mom and dad separated, how much it hurt me. I was missing my father. So, you need that man figure in a child's life, so, that's what I believe in.
Yeah. And, one of the big questions I get all the time, okay, I've done 4 tours in Afghanistan. I've been all over the world. I've been in multiple different kinds of efforts and what have you. And people ask me, how do you reconcile? How do you resolve murder in the name of state versus murder on the streets? What's the difference between the two? Okay. So Bob, my question to you, how do you reconcile or resolve in your mind the murders that we must commit in the name of state against those who are on the street and do it in the name of their family?
There is no answer to that one, I mean, all the countries I've served in, for instance, Lebanon, that breaks down because there was no state. And communities defend themselves, whether they're, Shia or Sunni or whatever, they defend themselves. In a country like Lebanon, everybody has an automatic weapon, and I mean everybody. You have a Kalashnikov under your bed, and you have a grenade launcher, and you even have a mortar. And this is still true today. In these communities, when things get bad, pull out those weapons and they shoot each other. They never shoot up schools or they don't go to McDonald's, but when it comes to defend the tribe, they do it. So this is very much a Well, let me ask you this question. I mean, how do people feel about the Ukrainians murdering Russians in Moscow, blowing them up with car bombs? And the Ukrainians are getting slaughtered. You know, this whole definition. You know, if you're working for the American government and you're told to hit a house, an assault, you're SEAL Team 6, um, and you shoot anybody with a gun, you just don't ask that question. This is legitimate murder, and on the streets of the United States, it's not. But if you go to Lebanon, or you've got a lot of places in the Middle East and Africa, and even parts of East Asia or South America, to survive, you pick up a gun and kill people. It's a philosophical question. There's no answer to.
Yeah, yeah, and that's kind of like what I tell people. You know, when Jimmy was in his business with the Bath Avenue crew and what have you, and the Bath Avenue crew was involved with murders along with the Bonanos and what have you. Their so-called quote state organization was the family, you know, and that was the commander in chief, if you will, of the family was the boss who said, for the survival of the family, we need to take this guy out for whatever reason. It could be retribution, could be, you know, cheating, it could be violating rules, whatever the reason was. Okay. I'm not here to defend that. I don't condone that. I don't believe in that. I never have, and what have you. All I'm simply saying is that that was their motivation, and that was the architecture of their institution. But in government, there is also people who are required as a matter of state action that do the same thing, whether that's for war or what have you, and so forth and so on. So Michael Hacker asked me, do you think this would be happening if Trump was in office, meaning Ukraine? My own personal opinion, I'm not going to talk about it from the political perspective or what have you, but I will say that clearly we're in a completely different time today. There's a lot of people who have published widely suggesting that the exit from Afghanistan was a green light to Putin, who decided to invade Ukraine because the United States would turn a blind eye. And that we did it in 2014, we did it with Georgia, we did it with Crimea, we did it in Afghanistan, and therefore we would do it again. Bob, what's your thinking on that?
Oh, I think Putin definitely saw weakness. He saw the United States turning isolationist. He looked at Biden and said, this guy's never going to want to fight a war here. But the real point is, for me, as a former intelligence officer, what was Putin thinking? He could go into Ukraine in 2 days. Trust me, the Ukrainians are not a people you want to take on if they're any way united. The Ukrainian peasants are Vikings, and they will fight till the last drop of blood. So his thinking, what amazes me is, and I used to work with the Russian army in Central Asia, drove tanks with them and jumped with them, their special forces. I knew that Russian army was corrupt, but I had assumed very ignorantly that since I was in Central Asia with them, they got their act together. They clearly couldn't. And Russia is a criminal state. And I really think we need to worry about that thing coming apart at the seams and the Russians starting to kill each other, or something equally bad where they're using tactical nuclear weapons. I think we are looking in Ukraine and Russia into the abyss. This war is not going away. The Russians can flatten Ukraine all they want with artillery, but the Ukrainians are going to come back at them. And what is happening inside Russia? That's what really concerns me, because these guys do have nukes that can hit all our cities, and who's going to be in charge with it? And so I think it's a really scary situation. And by the way, I thought the Russians would take Kiev in 2 days too. I mean, I was on TV saying that the Russians are going to be there. Wrong.
But I don't think the nukes are going to be involved.
Well,
That's the end game.
that's the end game, but it's the chaos that I always worry about. Who gets a hold of these things, and what do they do with them? Look, if Putin loses Crimea and there's big parts of Russia that are getting broken off, and it's his life or dropping attack on a unit in Ukraine, my bet, and I've been wrong before, and I may be again, is that he uses tactical nuclear weapons if things get really bad.
Where does the Chinese stand over here?
Yeah, well, the Chinese, I mean, they have completely flipped out in a totalitarian state, which we don't understand really what's the motivation there. Are they going to go into Taiwan? I don't know anybody that knows that. And it's like, let's wait to see.
Now we're talking into politics. Now, how about they're creating their own dollar?
Their own version of the dollar.
Yes. Oh, they're yeah. Well, look at our friend. I wrote a book about Saudi Arabia, and I guarantee you, if I went back there, the first person they'd be had that next Friday would be me. So don't trust me on Saudi Arabia. But I mean, these guys, we've been defending them with the Fifth Fleet for all these years, and now they're aligning with Putin and China on oil. I mean, come on. I mean, these are really bad guys. I mean, Prince Bonesaw that chopped up the Washington Post, the opinion guy. It's incredible. They chopped the guy up alive.
Khashoggi.
This comment over here, what do you think about it? China is terrified of the U.S.
Yeah, because they are terrified because we'll nuke them, and plus we have a system that works. I mean, they completely messed up COVID. They wrecked their economy briefly, and they're one power that can destroy them. And our ideology, our freedom, can't destroy them. They hate it.
What do you think about this theory? Okay, this is kind of like in your wheelhouse. So we know that that when Israel and Syria and Russia were operating at the same time, Russia, essentially by way of proxy, began a process to literally create a meat grinder in Syria that attracted Hamas, Hezbollah, and what have you, out of Lebanon into the meat grinder. And it benefited, if you will, to a certain extent. It benefited Israel. Why? Because every person that was ground up in that meat grinder, that was Hezbollah or Hamas from Syria, was one less that they'd have to.
Well, the Saudis too.
Yeah.
What do you do? You take your children that you can't do anything with and send to Syria to get killed. That's one way to handle it.
Right.
And the same way with Hezbollah. By the way, this whole war in Syria, I went there for a couple of years ago for the Bureau, for the FBI, to talk to the Syrians. And when I drove across the border, the guy took my passport and said, he started talking to me in Arabic, and I could say he was Lebanese. And so my driver, says, when the guy walks away, says, oh, yeah, he's from Hezbollah. So Hezbollah controls the border. And the military road going from Lebanon into Syria was all controlled by Hezbollah. So what happened was the Israelis sucked Hezbollah into Syria and just got them massacred. So they really can't find Israel. So somebody was very smart in this if you're anti-Hezbollah.
Right.
I mean,
was that person that was smart? Israel.
Yeah, they knew exactly what they were doing.
Yeah. And so the question I have is always, is that really what's happening in Ukraine?
That's what's exactly happening. We want the Russian army ground down to nothing.
Right.
And so they can't go into the Baltics, they can't go into Poland or anywhere else. Just grind them down, and that's exactly what's happening.
Right.
We have a lot of good comments here. Here's one over here. We don't ever want war with China. They outnumber us at least 20-1. I know they got machine guns that shoot out a million bullets in a minute. I mean, with this technology, I mean, that don't even mean nothing with the Chinese. I mean, there's so many weapons today. We don't even know what they have.
We know what they have because they stole them from us, all their technology. We used to have, Loch Norris, where they test their bombs. And so we had these sites up here looking into China. And every time the Chinese set off a bomb, they could see a signature and it was stolen from Los Alamos. And where do you think all the North Korean stuff is from? It's from the Chinese. And the Chinese stole it from Los Alamos.
Check out.
And so they have these miniature nuclear bombs, which are what?
Here's another comment. The next war is going to be AI and drones.
Yeah, we were just, Bob and I happened to be just talking about that before the show began, showing how artificial intelligence can take incredible content, if you will, and make you into something you're not. He showed me an illustration of a true patriot. His name is Mr. Kennedy, we'll call him. That was a individual that AI made into someone that loved Hitler.
Yeah, which he doesn't. It's crazy. But I'll tell you, Jim, you give me $100 million now, and I can make the next president 2024 with AI.
Wow,
that's sad.
I guarantee you, with whoever, you could run anybody, and you could change opinions. I can get on the phone. There's technology to hear people talking about which conspiracy theories they believe in and what they believe. Find out who those people, micro target them with AI, and I can win you the election, $100 million.
Yeah, and easily, because AI can literally take an entire neighborhood of individuals, if you will, create their voices in exactly like Jimmy Calandra. They could take, because you have so much content on YouTube. They could take your voice, if you will, exactly you, turn you into something else, saying something else, calling all of your neighbors saying to vote for ABC, and it's not even you. It's your voice, it's your image, and everything else, and you're making the phone calls, and they could even have it so you're being interactive with your neighbors. Hello, Don, how you doing? It's Jimmy. How you been doing?
In other words, we could destroy your reputation in 24 hours, and people, they say, well, I don't know what's true, but we can't trust this guy anyhow. And you can destroy people with AI permanently and for good, and there's no way to recover from it.
Wow. That's
that's a lot. One of the reasons why a lot of people are very concerned about artificial intelligence getting into both either the wrong hands or the wrong purpose.
I like to be scared, and I'm scared. So I'm a very happy man.
Yeah.
What do you think about this comment? We shouldn't be defending and aiding Ukraine in the first place. They are corrupt and rotten to the core, especially under Zelensky. The American people are not told the whole story.
Well, you want to know why? Because the established press don't tell the whole story. They know it, but they won't tell it. I don't believe in the deep state, but there is an elite in this country who thinks alike, and I've been up against it before. And if you are off key on whatever you're saying, they just you get canceled. So the corruption is in Ukraine exists, but there's nobody covering it in depth. In the kind of weapons that are going to Ukraine, it's a big story. It's beyond me, but the problem is you have two criminal organizations, one in Kiev and then one in Russia with Prigozhin fighting a war. So we're looking at two basically militias. Now there are a lot of Ukrainians that are fighting and dying, who are true patriots. I call them Ukrainian peasants, and you don't want to piss them off. You don't want to piss them off, and they're pissed off. They have nothing to do with the corruption in Kiev. And the Ukrainians know about the corruption, but it's the whole system. Remember, this all goes back to the 70s when the Soviet Union was just utterly corrupt. The KGB was the Soviet mafia. They sold oil, they stole artifacts, they stole diamonds and the rest, and they sold it around the world. So the KGB is a criminal organization. So anytime you have this kind of corruption going so deep, nothing's going to be clear.
You know, Bob, it's amazing you say that. So nothing is going to be clear. So it harkens back to what we talked about in the beginning, the movie Syriana. If there's one thing that the movie Syriana and the book that preceded it, which created Syriana, stood for the premise of there are no blacks or whites any longer. Everything is gray tones. And today we live in a world of gray tones. Okay, nothing is clear any longer, and it makes understanding and appreciating any sense of morality very difficult because we live in such a gray world and in a gray space, like we've never lived before. Okay, we don't know what is up and what is down, what is left or what is right. You know, in even in our own institutions in America today, in education and the schools and what have you, the blurring of everything, whether that's sexual identity and wokeism, all of these other things, it creates such gray tones. One of the things that's kind of amazing when Bob wrote the book, years ago, whatever, and then it became the best-selling or Academy Award-winning movie, was how prescient it was, how it turned out to be just that way, years later, because that's where we are today.
Yeah, and it's like I just for me, I just told the facts. I mean, so many of these government books are simply people writing books to establish a reputation. They work for a big institute, and there's certain lines you can't cross.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to make money in Washington and go to work for a big institute, do not criticize the Saudis. Seriously, don't, because you're cut out. You will see nothing about the way that country works because they spread money around. And the UAE spent bazillions of dollars, parties. They fund party, it's dark money. It sloshes around oil money. And you take them on and you're done. And that's why I'm going to die a poor man. I don't care. And I don't mind dying canceled and poor. Just I'm used to it now.
Jimmy, you had a question?
Give a shout out to Big G 484. Thanks for the $50. I appreciate it. Thanks for the support. Also, thanks to Boston J for the $5. Very kind of you. You don't have to do that. We appreciate it. Thank you, Boston J. But we also wanted to talk about what went on in New York in the last couple of days with
yes,
the royal friends Mark, Harry, and Meghan as New York City car chase story unravels.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah. I tell you, I don't know how much of this is true because in New York, on every corner, you have a dozen cameras.
Yeah.
Okay. You have a dozen cameras. Okay. And you ain't getting away with nothing today. Okay.
Yeah.
And everybody sees everything.
Yeah. Well, and also, Jimmy, because of the work you do, the idea of going 80 miles an hour or whatever they were claiming down FDR Highway, and particularly at 10 o'clock at night, right after that affair, several things went wrong with that you have to look at and say, number one, whose fault was it when they elected not to do what any normal security package would entail? Number one, you always have a safe zone. Okay. In this case, it would have been the Carlisle Hotel. That's where Princess Di used to go. That's where they used to go. They've had rooms there and what have you. So you always have a safe zone that you can go to and you can duck into quickly, not a house or what have you.
It was just insane. When I went to stay with Clooney and the way he got away from people. By the way, when I drove up to his house in Lake Como, there were girls hanging from the trees waiting for a glimpse of him. And then you had the paparazzi coming by his house every 5 minutes. The way he got away, he has the fastest boat in Lake Como. He came, where the two of us came roaring out of this, where the boats were docked, this fast boat, and we're clear across the lake and no one could keep up. So, I mean, people like that, true celebrities can figure out how to deal in New York with this and getting competent security people.
But
You don't get yourself photographed in front of a Hertz, counter.
it's definitely impossible to have a 2-hour chase in New York City. It's never going to happen.
No.
They'll pick you up within 15 minutes in New York City. You're done.
Yeah. Yeah. And, with all due respect to the guy that led their security, Mr. Sanchez, who I understand, he spent a lot of years with the Secret Service. He was on President Obama's detail and what have you. However, I think this one got away from him because he allowed the protectee to make the choices, or the representatives. For example, if you don't want to be photographed and pursued by the paparazzi, okay, the number one thing you would never allow the sponsor to that affair that they were going to is to have a single photographer only, and depriving all the other photogs an opportunity. Because the moment you do that, you're setting up a kinetic kind of opportunity for them to, trounce. That's number one error. Number two error was that he allowed them to walk out in front of the photogs, okay, for a moment to be photographed by them, followed by getting them into the first car, the SUV. If you're going to do it correctly, you'd bring them out the back way. The car would have been parked right up against the door, and they would have been gone. And there would have been three other SUVs that were identical, okay, going in separate different directions.
That's identical. What we used to do in Lebanon, we had 20 cars in a convoy. If it was a VIP, identical, and you switched them around the cars. So if you're putting a car bomb to kill somebody, you never knew which car it was. And with the ambassador, the way we protect him, we'd send like 5 cars out, look like his cars, then we'd send him out in a trash truck.
Yeah,
as a passenger.
Right. So they kind of like set this thing up so that it was doomed to fail, okay, and turn into a disaster, and then they complained about it. What protectee in their right mind would say, I'm going to go stay at a friend's house? It's ridiculous. When you could have all the support and the guards and the protection, the infrastructure. The Carlisle Hotel is one of the most protected hotels in New York City. Could be. I mean, when they're set up. Princess Di used to stay there at the Royal Suite. It's $8,000 a night, but hey.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. They went cheap.
Yeah.
There are people in California who will tell you exactly what entrance, how to do this and security and the rest of the set. It's expensive, but they decide to cut corners. I'll bet you anything.
But New York City is very safe, believe me. There's a lot of security out there.
Yeah. Well, put it this way, the true story of what happened could easily be determined because there are so many cameras. There are so many, and this is not even counting ATM machines, remote sensor platforms that come off of the red light system, any number of different things off the squad cars that are going up and down the street that have cameras on their back ends, and all sorts of other kinds of things that exist, which would tell them exactly, where the cars were, how long they were out, and what have you.
It was a fiasco. If you're a celebrity, it's the last thing you want to get caught up in is what happened in New York City. It's incredible that they allowed this.
Yeah. What other kinds of questions we got? You got
any questions for our guest tonight? I'll tell you, the CIA, very impressive for sure.
Look, when I tell people, they said, if you had a chance I joined the CIA, I was like 21 or 22, would you go back and do it again? Yep. On the other hand, if someone came along and they had a kid, I would send them to the military for 5 years. It straightens people out. I know a lot of people don't want to hear it, but send them to the military. The best CIA officers had done tours that when I was in Vietnam, and they really had their heads screwed on, and they'd matured there. The CIA is not the kind of place you want to mature in. You want to come in, mature, and, learn what you can. But no, I would definitely do it again. Everything I understand about the world, I learned at the CIA. And it was all based on, I got to tell you, it's on telephone taps, National Security Agency. You can really figure out what is going through people's minds, and you can listen to them on the phone. And especially when they're in an argument, you know what they're thinking. And it gives you an insight into the world, which most people never get.
And on the military side, it goes back to like what Jimmy and I were talking about in his work with endangered or youths who find themselves in the street and what have you, that are at harm kids and what have you. Maybe an option for them is the military if they want to serve. Maybe that's the place that they could go to not only make a contribution to their own life, but that it gives them the structure that they need in order to, head down a different path. The military does offer enormous benefits today, like it has never been before. You can literally be in for 3 years, okay? Take a pause, all right? The military will then let you go out, go to college of your choice that you can get into, pays everything, including your salary, including your benefits, okay? You then get your degree, maybe it's a bachelor's degree. Then you come back to the military for another, instead of 1 year, another 4 years to pay back the student loan. Okay, well, who could argue with a deal like that? If you think about college today, okay, tuition, room and board, and everything else, all of which the military picks up, say it's 50 grand a year, and that's cheap, by the way. So right off the bat, that's 200,000 just in tuition. Plus all of the room and board and everything else and so forth. So, there are a lot of benefits behind doing it that way. And for those who, are listening and what have you, that are thinking about that kind of a career, not only do you and are you contributing to yourself, to your family, to your friends, to your community, and to your country, but you may be saving your life. You may be saving your life. I think back upon Jimmy's story, and out of all of the people that were in the Bath Avenue crew, Jimmy, how many are alive today?
Well, you got me, you got Fabrizio, you got Tommy Reynolds. There's a couple, but there's a lot of them that's dead, were murdered.
Right. And or died of drug overdose.
Yeah, yep, sure. There's a couple of them that died of drug overdose. Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's a question there. Can CIA operate in the United States? There came a point after 9/11 where the CIA was seconded to the FBI. They could do break-ins. So yeah, they can under special circumstances. And if you want somebody to do a good break-in, you go to the CIA.
Here's a good question right here. How do you help poor minorities and broken homes succeed?
Man, oh man. Education is it.
Education.
It's the hard way up, education.
Yep. Education is definitely a start for sure.
You get a skill, and I don't care if you have a college education. Get a skill. Be a welder, a mechanic.
See what you're saying? You welder, mechanic. Years ago, when I was a kid growing up, and I was in the public schools, they taught this stuff to us. Then we had this schooling of we played with plastic, we played with metal. They took this away from the public schools, so they don't have it anymore.
People, I don't care if you have a PhD in philosophy. If you can work with your hands, you understand the world a lot better, and it gives you confidence that you don't get from books. And all I do these days is read. So I'm a big reader, but being able to do something with your hands, you can't beat it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say the second answer to that is you got to find a mentor, somebody, whether it's a big brother, a mentor, a person who, in AA we talk about, a sponsor. Okay, in other programs we talk about a counselor. It could be a parish priest. It could be somebody who is giving of themselves completely and totally towards making certain um, that you're doing something for yourself and what have you. In another show I talked about how do you know um, when you've met your first best friend? Okay, how do you know when you met your first best friend, for that kid in the street that doesn't know which direction? It's that person who brings out within you all of your best love for yourself, all of your best pride, all of your best wisdom that you have, everything within you that is good. That's how you know you've met your best friend. And how do you know your worst enemy? It's that guy in the street that wishes for you nothing but bad. The person that brings out from within you all of your rage, all of your anger, and all of your jealousy and envy towards you and others. That's your worst enemy. Run from that person. So, to the person who asked that question, education clearly has got to be, an element of it. But also, you have to find somebody somewhere in your life that will give you the opportunity to provide you, the wisdom that you may be willing to listen to head in a different direction. Sometimes you can take the person out of the slum, but you can't take the slum out of the person. Ends bad, no matter education, chances, etc. Sad, but sometimes true. Falconetti, I couldn't say it more elegantly. It's true. There are some people who are just constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves or others and cannot be helped. And that's just a sad reality. You can't help everybody, but if you can help one, then you're halfway home.
But you know what it is? Some people want to be helped. Some people don't.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. If we have a few minutes left, minutes left, I want to talk briefly about Bob's new book, which is a really.
I don't want to talk about it. No. You don't want to read it.
Well, yes, you do. It's a great book.
Talk about it. Why?
What?
You don't want to talk about it?
I'm telling you, you don't want to read it.
Oh.
Don't say that. No, it's a great book.
Promote it. Go ahead. Promote it.
No, this last book, I crossed the line. Seriously, with my former colleagues, it's just like being canceled.
Well, what's the name of the book? Let people decide.
It's called The Fourth Man. It's about two investigations, one at the CIA, it's an old story, it's the biggest mystery, and one at the FBI. The FBI guy who followed this way back said it's the case that haunts the FBI more than any in modern times. It's unsolved. In his word, he said haunts, absolutely haunts the FBI counterintelligence. It is such a mystery, and it has caused more consternation than I ever thought I could commit, so don't read it.
Read it, everybody. It's a great book. I'm telling you, it is. And you'll enjoy it.
Read it.
Yeah.
Well, it's like the investigator sat me down and said, "You want to tell this story?" And me being a dupe, I said, "Yeah, I'll tell the story." So I did, and then checked with 200 people, and to make sure. And the reader has to come to their conclusion. It's not me. I just leave it. It's a mystery, and it's like, where's Jimmy Hoffa buried? It's one we'll never get an answer for.
That's what makes it a great book, though. And it's got to get have you? I shouldn't ask you this, but have you sold the movie rights yet?
No, I'm not selling the movie rights.
You're not gonna?
No.
Okay. Well, I'll buy them.
You got graffiti mat over here. He says, if the writer is telling me not to read it, I have to read it.
No, well, it's called a psyop in our world, you know.
That's why I've got a little farm. I've just got 3 new ducks, 3 rescue horses, 6 chickens, and 2 cows.
We were just up there.
And I'm just fine. I'm very happy with myself.
Jimmy, get this. You know where we were today, actually?
Where?
We were where John Wayne and Glenn Campbell filmed True Grit.
Oh, nice.
Okay? Yeah. It was unbelievable.
In the house I live in, John Wayne had owned it. It's on the title list that John Wayne had owned this house. And what happened was he went up this little town in the mountains and loved the place. And he and Glenn Campbell says, we want to buy the town. There's only one person, the mayor. And the mayor said, no, I'm not selling it to you. So they started playing poker, and they started playing strip poker. And the mayor, who had looked like a mud fence, looked at John Wayne and said, if we got to, what we got to do, and you get to buy the town. And he said, not in your life, Pilgrim, but he did. And that's how he got to own the town. And I've got the documents for it.
Wow.
That's incredible.
Oh,
And where we were at today, Bob used to be a part owner in this hotel, this whorehouse hotel. Excuse me, not whorehouse.
No, it's a whorehouse, if you want to know the truth.
And anyway, so up in the mountains and what have you. But seriously, this is when we were going through it. He was telling me that when True Grit was filmed, it was filmed right near the whorehouse hotel in this town, which later became, I think the Shootist, wasn't the Shootist his last movie before he died?
I don't know.
I think it was.
But it's way out in the middle of Colorado.
Yeah.
It's probably still snowing up there today, right now.
It was freezing when we left, let me tell you. The wind was blowing in. So, anyway.
So, yeah, I tell you, what? Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. I tell you, being a CIA agent, pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's fun. It's fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
And
this is much more fun than doing regular TV, I tell you.
Oh, yeah.
I would rather have my teeth pulled than do a TV interview for like 60 Minutes or CNN. I used to on CNN before. It's just like you got to be you got to worry about what you got to say, and you don't get to go where you want to go. And this is so much better.
Yeah, we have 113 people in the chat. We get maybe
2,000 of people watching.
Yeah, at the end of the video, we'll have thousands of people that'll view it. It's pretty cool. A lot of good people that watch us. But listen, hey, you can come again anytime you like.
Yeah, we got a lot of other ideas for guests too in the future, and different people that from different ideas, different show ideas. Jimmy and I talk about it during the week. We kind of come up with different ideas together, and then he kind of like calls the shots, and then tells me, like what he wants to, like focus on, and I tell him what I think and whatever, and then we just come up with something. So it's kind of a very informal, bounces off of one another idea that we came up with. Because at the end of the day, kind of like where this is all going, I can't speak for Jimmy, obviously, but I can speak for myself. You couldn't find 2 more opposite people, okay, with Jimmy and me. And yet we both.
You know what, Don? At the end of the day, and as we correspond with each other, all we do is we learn from each other.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Jimmy, I'll come back someday and talk to you on the phone about my days in Bay Ridge.
Wow, yes, absolutely. You could tell us a story now from if you're a Bay Ridge guy.
All my friends were from the Gambinos, the Cantalupos, the Mastrangelos. They were all from Bay Ridge, and we used to hang out. And that's when you could drive in the 70s. I could get up to 80 miles an hour chasing the police when they were on a call, and they didn't care. We just barreled down there 2 o'clock in the morning through Brooklyn.
I tell you, you'll be surprised. One of those guys might be watching this show today.
Those guys are my best friends. They didn't never let me in on a secret, but we had more fun with those guys. Carlo Gambino III went to Catholic, and I was going to Georgetown at the time. I was basically adopted by a family there, and spent a lot of time up there. They really took me in.
Where specifically? Like, where are you?
Bay Ridge.
No, but I mean, where was it? How about an in-depth story about Sam Giancana sent Jack Ruby down to Cuba to get Santo Trafficante out of jail? That's a little bit out of my range. Yeah, too into the grasses. What I can tell you about that, from my perspective anyway, was that it didn't happen exactly the way that question posed it. Okay, it didn't exactly happen that way. Sam Giancana, John Roselli, and so forth. Yeah, they were clearly, together in a lot of different things and what have you. But the idea that there was this confederation with Santo Trafficante, Carlos Marcello, and others to actually, plot out the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and using as a part of the conspiracy Jack Rubenstein, or Ruby, as a part of it, I don't believe. Okay, I don't believe in conspiracies that are that complex. Most conspiracies have a simple storyline and a simple explanation. I'm not suggesting that Lee Harvey Oswald necessarily was a lone shooter, but nor am I saying that what was asked here was the case.
You know what happened to me when I got into the CIA? This was 76.
Yeah.
There was a file regarding Kennedy, and I knew the name. It was based on Topaz, if you remember that novel.
Yeah.
And so I knew that this guy had a 20-volume file. But the file was black taped. That means nobody can read it. It needs to be empty. It goes to archives, and it's locked in skiffs and all these. And so George Bush, the father, was director. And it was a Saturday, and I went up to his office, and I put a bunch of papers on his desk to sign it. He signed it, releasing the file to me. And the notice came back from archives, file missing. It's gone, destroyed. 20 volumes on the Kennedy assassination. Wow. Gone. That's the Topaz story with Leon Uris. So I have no idea what was in it. But I just find, how do you lose 20 volumes of a paper, that much paper? It was just gone from the shelves.
Wow.
And never been since seen either. When they black tape a file, okay, that's a serious matter, because it means it goes into multiple internal compartments within the skiff itself.
And only the director could release it.
Yeah. Or the DDO.
It's like the Freedom of Information Act. When you
no, that wouldn't work.
No, but when you order something, there's a lot of black tape on it.
No, this is more secret than just blacking it out. They actually take tape and they seal it, so that even the people in archives can't read the file.
I got you.
So think of it like it looks like black electrical tape.
Yeah.
Okay, with these tiny little seals around them that go over the tape, under the tape, and through the ribbons of the file, and it's wrapped around it. And then the block of the tape and the file is then put into a container, which is a certain kind of vault, a vault, which is then inside of a skiff and what have. Very, very difficult to gain access to it, and then only based upon the permission or the signature, really, of the director, so the DCI.
That's all I know about the Kennedy thing. Yeah. But I did go down. I did do acoustics in Dealey Plaza. That grassy knoll. And if you were standing on the grassy knoll and someone was shooting, you would hear sound would appear to be shots coming from behind you. So if you look at that scientifically, the grassy knoll thing doesn't work. But the big question about Kennedy, I did a show. I hosted a show for History Channel on this. Is where was after he shoots Kennedy? He goes downstairs, jumps on a bus, it gets in traffic. He jumps off the bus, gets a taxi, but he gets a transfer. Also, so why was he getting a transfer? Where was he going? And then he goes back to gets his gun, his sidearm, his 6-shooter, and goes across and shoots the Dallas police. But where was he going? The Dallas sheriff knew he had been in a house that was occupied by Cubans. And he calls up the FBI and the Secret Service, says, you guys got to come look at this because the Cubans have left in the last 24 hours. There's just all sorts of real non-conspiracy things about that assassinations where there are no answers. The head of the Secret Service told me that when she got into the job, she looked into the file where the Kennedy assassination was held, and it was empty. Nothing. It was like all gone.
Wow.
And I interviewed the KGB officer who saw when Oswald takes a bus down to Mexico City and goes into the Russian embassy. He meets with 3 KGB officers, right? 2 of them are just normal officers. One is Department 13, that's a head of assassinations. So this is in Moscow. I'm interviewing this guy. And I said, oh, like, what did you do? What'd you talk about? And he says, well, Oswald, at one point, he was a great storyteller, pulls his revolver out, his Smith & Wesson, and starts waving it around. And I said, what'd you do? And he said, I took it away from him, of course. And I put the bullets in my pocket. And then 2 hours later, after they finish interviewing him, he gives him back the pistol and the bullets. And Oswald takes off and goes and shoots the pallet down. So I said, this is really bad tradecraft, dude, because you had your fingerprints on bullets that killed a Dallas policeman. And he goes, Bob, this stuff happens. But the interesting thing is that Korshakov, the Department 13 guy, the assassin, ran assassinations, talked to Oswald for 20 minutes in the hall of the Soviet embassy. I said, what did he talk about? And he said, nothing, they just chatted. I said, how do you know that? He says, well, Korshakov was my friend, he would have told me. But the point is, 8 weeks before the assassination, Oswald has a 20-minute discussion in private with the KGB officer whose head that does assassinations in North America. And these are all facts. This is not, this isn't stuff it's sort of weird. I mean, why was he talking 20 minutes to Oswald alone? And what did he say to him? And then Oswald goes to the Cuban embassy where he's in the lobby shouting that I'm going to assassinate Kennedy. He's shouting this, and there's transcripts of the CIA, and they never gave it to the Warren Commission, those transcripts. They're public now. You can find them. You can take the pieces of this story, and all of you get a lot of questions that I've never seen answers for.
Well, and a lot of them, there are no answers because there's no data from which to derive an answer because the data is gone, And speaking of which, so I have a question, Jimmy. So how do you like this for an idea? And I throw this out to the audience as well. How would people like a show that we could do? Jimmy and I could do this show together of the untold story behind Watergate. Okay, the untold story. This is something Bob and I happen to be.
Let me tell you a story about it. A friend of mine, he was a very slight man. He was like very small, and it's like they call him in and they show him. He's a CIA officer, right? Good friend of mine, and they show him a picture of a woman walking down the street. And he says, who's that? And they said, oh, it's the secretary to the Democratic National Committee. And you're going to become her. It's called identity transfer. So they put prosthetic cheeks in and everything like this. And so this guy, Magnus, they call him and say, hey, put your outfit on. And he's, pantsuit, make him look like a woman. They call him into the White House to see Haldeman and said, look, you're going to not say a word. Not say a word. That's all you got to do. You got that? And so he doesn't really understand. He's like a GS2. He doesn't know what's going on. At one point, he reaches on there and starts scratching his bra. The guy says, you touch your tit again, and I'm going to cut your hand off. And so Magnus does it. Then he's got the meeting's going on forever. And then Magnus has got to go to the bathroom. So Haldeman says, let's send my secretary so you can go to the bathroom. He says, no, it's all right. We'll go out and talk anyhow. So Magnus has to go pee in a coffee can in the closet at the White House. God knows what the cleaning staff thought, whether it was pee in there. But the point of all this story is the original break-in at Watergate, and I truly believe this was going to be a CIA operation. They were going to dress up this guy as the secretary, take the badge, get in, put the transmitters in or go through the drawers or whatever. And that's what's never, ever been answered, is why the CIA would agree to break into the Democratic National Committee. We know they provided a lot of props and things like that, but they were actually going to do the operation. And I don't have an answer because I don't know what Nixon went to the director, I guess it was Helms, right, and said what they said.
Yeah.
But it was originally going to be a government rather than contractors, coming in rather than Hunt and Liddy. So it's another question I've never had answered.
I don't want to stay on too much longer. We're in for an hour and 20 minutes, but also, I mean, how about the FBI today? The FBI is very biased. And, look at the Russian hoax with Donald Trump. I mean, that just came out. That's on, how that was all a bunch of bull, and they went along with it. Then you got this other guy, what's his name? Schiff?
Yeah, Adam Schiff,
Adam Schiff, another guy. I mean, you got all these corrupt politicians. I mean, these corrupt law enforcement people. I mean, how do you fix this?
Yeah, it's really disheartening because we were talking about this before the show, in the Durham report that just was published this past week. We could have talked about that through this whole show today. You have to ask yourself why he did not charge a number of people that could have been charged.
Well, why didn't he interview Comey?
Yeah.
When you want to go see Comey and ask him?
Yeah.
How about when they arrested the general? What's his name? General, what is it? Kelly?
Flynn.
What is it?
Flynn, you mean?
Yeah, General Flynn.
Yeah.
General Flynn. They arrested him, right? I mean, it was all a hoax. It was all. I mean, how's the stuff like this happen?
What is frightening is the fact that something that sophisticated, you almost have to say, that was a Russian counterintelligence operation that was fantastically created for destruction of our institutional systems.
Yeah, it's the Russians. I blame everything on the Russians.
Yeah.
Jimmy, do you know what a 1001 charge is?
I don't.
That's what the FBI does when they come interview you. They ask you a question like, "What's the weather like outside?" And you say, "Oh, it looks sunny, but there happens to be some clouds." Well, you've just committed perjury.
Huh.
That's how you get witnesses along the way. They won't charge you with perjury, but they want to have that weapon. The prosecutor wants that. Just don't ever go to court. Don't piss the FBI off. Don't go to court. Don't piss off a U.S. attorney. Never do it. It's just not worth it.
Well, I'll put it this way. I mean, my view of it is this, okay? If anybody ever comes up to you and wants you to interview you from the government and starts off with the words, hello, I'm from the FBI and the U.S. government, trust us, pick up the phone and call a lawyer and make certain that lawyer is with you in the room throughout the entire process, so that someone can make notes of the exchange, and B, so that you can be, guided accordingly. And watch how fast the interview ends.
And you know what else you do? You have $1 million you can pay lawyers in the bank account. That's what you need.
Yeah, right. In this day and age.
What?
Wasn't George Bush Sr. the head of the CIA at one time?
Yeah, that's the guy I gave to sign the paper. I tricked him and put all those papers in front of him.
That's why Bob is now an author.
That's why he's raising chickens
on the side of the mountain. But writes great books, people. Look up on Amazon.com, Robert Baer, Baer, and buy his books. And if you need his address or whatever, reach out to me. My email address for all my YouTube stuff is DDelta-ALpha-MB2020@protonmail.com. Anybody needs any help or wants to talk with me or whatever, DAMB2020@protonmail.com. And I'll make certain that your book gets autographed. It's a promise.
There you go. Well, listen, Don, thank you for joining us today.
Yep.
Thank you, Bob, for coming on. We appreciate it. And hopefully we have you again. And until next time, next Sunday, me and Don will be here. we'll have another topic we'll be talking about. So to everyone out there, thanks for showing up.
And God bless. Have a good week. Stay safe. Stay strong. God first.
Stay out of trouble.
Right.
Okay, guys. Well, I'll see you next week. And this week, I'm going to be doing something with my brother. We're going to do a show one day this week talking about acting and old-time gangsters, the actors playing the gangsters. So we're going to have fun with that. I don't know. One day this week, I'll put it up when it's going to be done. But to everyone out there, listen to me. Thank you so much for showing up. We had 115 people in the chat. And until next time, enjoy your Sunday. Spread love to people. Be kind to others. Put God first. And always do the right thing. Bye, guys. See you soon.
Yeah.
The streets will never make you grow. It's not a seed. It's a gutter. There's no happy endings in this life. So this is my message to you. The streets will never love you back.